Well, welcome everyone. I am here. I'm Mary Halpin Carter, head of the Derryfield School, and I'm delighted to be conducting another fireside chat. We're hitting a 1 year anniversary of having fireside chats, and I'm delighted to be here tonight with Jill Roberts, the Director of Safety and Assistant Dean of Students, as well as Latin teacher extraordinaire. So we're so thrilled to be with you here tonight. Thanks, Jill, for being
Thank you so
here.
much. Good to see everyone, so to speak.
Good to imagine everyone.
Yeah,
You
we're
all
back.
look fabulous, by the way, from where we're sitting. We can imagine you all. We also want to, just before we get started, ask for a favor. If you could keep your eyes open for a parent survey, there's one coming your way this week, and we would love to have your opinion on a number of questions. And one of those questions has to do with vacation calendar and what to do next year. So this year we did something unusual and had 3 weeks together. We'd like to know how you felt about that as compared to the usual 1 week in February, 2 weeks back at school, and then the 2 weeks of March break. So if you can keep an eye out in your email for that, that would be terrific. So Jill and I we're here rather, way back on August 13th for a fireside chat. And at that time, we were talking about health protocols and their implications for school life. The same topic as today. But when we look back in August, we were, all looking for an explanation and what the data was on why we could be one of the few schools in New England that was going to be in session on campus every day and how we would be opening safely. And our guiding principles continue to focus on the same topics, on the health and well-being of our students and our faculty and our staff and our families, and also on top-notch education for our students. So the foundations of our health and safety protocols remain the same. And those foundations include the things you know so well by this point. Excuse me, I have a puppy who's trying to get into the door. I'm not sure if you could hear the scratching, but not to worry. But Hefty will have to wait. But our health protocol foundations remain the same. The big six, as our Fusion Cell consultants call them: pre-screening with the Magnus app, masking, cleaning the school, our HVAC system filters and air purifiers, hand hygiene, and then distancing. Though tonight we're going to talk about an adjustment, a limited adjustment to that distancing. And then we added on top of that in the winter weekly testing, and we plan to continue that at least through the month of April. So Jill, let's get started talking about the adaptations that we're going to be making moving forward and when each of them might go into effect.
Excellent. So I'm going to begin with the most significant change to kind of the quality of the educational experience here at Derryfield, and that is that students may now be positioned 3 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart when they are in their classrooms, masked in their classrooms. And they can also stand 3 feet apart in outdoor audiences or seated in an auditorium, supervised, when it's just students. So a new study came out in the Journal of Clinical Infectious Diseases, and it shows that in the setting of universal face mask usage in classrooms, in schools, COVID-19 infection rates were really equivalent for schools that implemented either a minimum of 3 feet or 6 feet of social distancing, physical distancing rather. 3 feet and 6 feet do show similar risk profiles for person-to-person transmission when it is in the student realm. And according to our pals at Fusion Cell, our kind of epidemiological consultants, this study really holds weight in terms of highly controlled settings. So where students don't move around much, where teachers are there to regulate and to observe and to help with tracing purposes. And this is super significant for Derryfield because it allows us to do away with all of the satellite spaces that we have set up around the school and get every single student into the mothership classroom. So that is huge for us. That's huge. And there's there are places where there are going to be no changes. I'll kind of talk about those for a minute, but then we'll circle back. So there will be no change on buses. The study was really done, you know, in schools and within that classroom setting, within that kind of stationary setting. There will also be no change to mask breaks or recess, outdoor lunch, because these are not really highly structured things that are going on. So it's good to kind of keep our conservative protocols in place when you're in a less structured environment. So again, it really only applies to the stationary or assigned spaces, but you know, like I said, this is just huge for getting everybody into those mothership classrooms. Staff and teachers will still remain 6 feet from the kids and until at least until they are fully vaccinated. And that includes the 14 days beyond the second shot if they receive a 2-shot vaccination. You know, as always, we have to watch out for, you know, unfolding news. So variants could disrupt this plan. So that's my caveat for you, is that the variants could disrupt this plan. And we could wind up going back to using our satellite spaces, but hopefully that's not the case. And this is actually going to be accomplished for the middle school. It's pretty much already done. We broke up the satellite rooms today. Big thanks to B&G for helping us with that. It's awesome. And in the upper school, all of the satellite rooms will be kind of, you know, dismantled, and kids will all be in their mothership classrooms by the end of next week. So that's about April 2nd for the upper school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jill just gave a nice shout out to our buildings and grounds team. And the reason it takes a little bit longer in the upper school is it isn't just as simple as putting more chairs into a room. There are fire codes as well, so they have to map it all out correctly. But they are very dedicated, and they will get that done very in short order.
Yeah, they're so they're so
And
great.
how happy are our teachers about this, Jill?
Oh, we had teachers like virtually weeping and literally weeping today over this. They were so happy to be able to have all of their kids in the classroom with them. So
Yeah,
um,
and others who have been so thrilled to have newly vaccinated students back in their classrooms who they haven't seen some of them for a year
yeah,
because they've been virtual. So it's been a
yeah,
great week.
it's awesome. And
Yeah.
I was one of those people who has been virtually teaching all year. So this is my first week back on campus, and to be able to have every kid in my room with me, I don't even have the words to say how happy that makes me. So Mary, a transition here. Would you like to talk about the next adaptation, which is actually the change in travel policy? A lot of people have been asking about this one.
Absolutely. So the adjustment that we're going with is that we will not have quarantine after domestic travel. So what we would require is that if you travel outside of New England, that you get a PCR test 3 to 5 days after you return and give documentation of that negative test to our nurse, Lainey Shaughnessy. So this means that you may travel by airplane or train, and we just ask, of course, that you follow health guidelines the whole time you travel, and that you monitor yourself for symptoms and signs of COVID-19 in the 14 days after you return from your travel. And of course, if you develop symptoms, you stay home and get a PCR test to check again. But this travel change means that there is no quarantine. And the reason for this, according to our consultants, is that travel does not constitute, nor has it, a defined exposure, just a more likely exposure. And we're so different than we were in the fall because there's been this body of evidence and experience and study that shows that many people are traveling safely around the United States because they're following health guidelines. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, and this is also important because this means something, a little something for our students who are in China currently, our Chinese students who had to kind of head home at the start of COVID and have been learning from afar. So, Mary, can you talk about what this means for the Chinese students?
Sure. So we're not all the way there yet because there's a travel ban still in place in terms of international travel to Europe, to China, to a number of places. It's not permitted yet. However, when that ban is lifted, we are hopeful that could happen as soon as possible and before commencement. But that would mean that our families come, our students in China and their families, I mean, our wish would be that they would get a PCR test before they travel with a negative result, then travel to the US and have a 7-day quarantine and get another negative test, and then they would be done. So only a 7-day plus test quarantine. So we are hopeful about that. So our travel protocols now align with the state of New Hampshire and with the CDC. And we, just to be clear, again, we'd love that. We want that copy of the negative PCR test, but that does not mean you have to wait to come to school. You can come to school before the test, you take the test, and before the test results are back. If you are at this moment on travel quarantine and you're wondering what that means for you, that means that you are welcome to return this Monday, March 29th. And part of the reason was that there was a huge bulk of people traveling over spring break, and the evidence was coming in. We really wanted to get beyond that because we're looking at some colleges and universities that are having some real trouble post spring break with folks coming back and not quarantining. We wanted to get sort of the bulk of people taken care of, and then after that, we will move to that. So starting Monday, March 29th, no quarantine needed for domestic travel. So Jill, can you talk about another type of quarantine and the adjustment around people who've been in close contact with someone who's been COVID positive?
Yes, absolutely. So we are adjusting our protocols a little bit. Once again, we are actually going to move from a 14-day quarantine after an exposure to a 10-day quarantine. And that's really in line with the state protocol. We are going to obviously continue contact tracing for all COVID positive cases in school, through our testing and kind of keeping track of where everybody is at all times of the day. But I'm Mary. I want to talk about kind of who does not need to quarantine anymore after getting being in close contact with a COVID positive person. So one does not need to stay home. And also does not need to get tested. There will be some people that will be exempt from our spit testing at school. So you do not need to stay home for 10 days or get tested for COVID if either of the following things apply. One, you're fully vaccinated against COVID-19 and more than 14 days have passed since your second shot. And two, if you have previously tested positive for active COVID-19 infection, either by PCR or antigen testing in the last 90 days. If you had a previous infection that was more than 90 days ago, you will still need to follow all of our quarantining guidelines. If you provide Nurse Shaughnessy with documentation of either full vaccination or you make her aware that you are still within that 90-day window of being COVID positive, she will make sure that you are exempt from testing. Likewise, if you are a close contact of a COVID positive individual, you do still need to monitor yourself for symptoms of COVID-19. You have to practice social distancing. You have to avoid social and other group gatherings, always wear a face mask when around others, and practice good hygiene at all times because we don't want it to spread further. So the reasoning behind this, the CDC and the states kind of experience thus far this year has shown that for schools, 10 days is presents a pretty negligible difference from 14 days due to the low rate of transmission in the school setting. This also, will align the quarantine for exposure with the quarantine for a positive test. And then Mary, I want to, get onto some happier things. So I'm wondering if we can kind of jump to speaking about performing arts, our performing arts plans for the spring. I know these are super important adjustments for our performing arts kids who have been so patient and amazing and waiting for their chance to safely return to their craft.
That is such great news, really. The performing arts students and families and those of us who love to go to performances, we've got good news on that front as well. And this spring is going to bring a number of performances, including choral and instrumental outdoor concerts, which is wonderful. We haven't had a real concert all year. So tune in next week. Here's the ad for next week's Fireside Chat. And next week we'll feature the Creative Arts Department, both the performing arts side and also the visual arts side, talking about the performances and the excitement to come.
Awesome. And then of course we cannot ever leave our athletes out of this whole discussion. So Mary, let's talk about the adaptations to sports competitions.
Sure. So when we think most generally, many precautions are going to stay in place for practices and sort of daily interaction, the way we have conducted it. The difference is in this spring season where we are not having to be as strict as we were in the fall, because in the fall, there was no evidence yet about what happens when kids play outdoors on interscholastic teams. And now we've got that kind of so much information about that, and most of it is very positive. And so when we start to think about schools playing other schools, our governing body for almost every sport at the upper school level is the NHIAA. And the NHIAA has a governing committee for each sport. So baseball has a committee, tennis has a committee, et cetera. And also sometimes in some situations, the division that we play in with our team, whether it's the teeny tiny D4 school league or the big D2 school league or the big D1 school league, each of those leagues are sometimes getting together and making rules this spring for their sport. They do that actually all the time. They have that jurisdiction too. But generally, and Derryfield, obviously, our teams follow the guidelines of the NHIAA or those committees or those division committees. So we are following those generally. If a league or a committee makes face coverings optional, then our athletes may choose whether or not they want to wear face coverings. We've worked closely with our AD and with our fusion cell consultants and with our coaches as to the proper level of face covering in each sport. And they differ based upon the level of contact for each sport and the evidence that's come in from the year of the pandemic around that sport. So they differ, and really this has to do with the competition level when you're in competition. So they did, for example, a tennis match, you know, the opponent is far away and the players are far from each other in a doubles match as compared to the intensity of, say, a lacrosse game. So for more information about each sport and how their interscholastic competitions will run, you will just inquire with your child's coaches or with our AD, Chris Hetler. Great. Well, we have come to the end of our brief presentation of our new adaptations, and we'd love to go to the Q&A and see.
Not yet. Did you talk about the spring events and traditions?
Oh my goodness, I forgot a whole section.
We can't leave those out. Hold on. Sorry, I just had to scroll down a little bit. Forgive us, everyone. So Mary, what good news do you have for us regarding spring events and traditions? I can't even speak tonight.
So one of our, joys is trying to bring normalcy back to kids while keeping to the health guidelines. So every tradition we're really analyzing and noodling over and thinking, how can we make this as normal as possible and still be safe? And the answer to most of them is go outside, have it outside. So I'm going to run down just to give you an idea of some of the kinds of activities and traditions that kids can look forward to this spring. So the first is the senior celebration, and that's happening in April, which we know is a very cold month, especially at night. And so that actually will be indoors. And because of that, students and their seniors and their advisors will be in the auditorium for that senior. It's a lot like, for those of you who have been to the 8th grade send-off, it's like that event, and their families will be able to view from home via broadcast. Then in lieu of having a winter carnival in our cold indoor months, we're having a spring carnival, which is being organized by our phenomenal student leaders and deans of student life. And that week of activities, which will also be at the end of April and be mostly outdoors, should be lots of fun. Then in addition, we are having a prom, and that prom is going to be outdoors, and masks and testing before prom and testing after prom will be part of that plan. The prom will be for the senior class, and it will feature plated meals or food trucks. We're looking into having pre-prom photo time so that parents can come and see the kids in the class all decked out, and also take their memento photographs. And it's also, prom is being scheduled in such a way, it'll be May 21st or 22nd. There's a rain date in there. And it's being planned so that with commencement on June 5th, even if there is an exposure at prom, the vast majority of people, of students or those who were exposed, would still be able to come to commencement. So more on prom, that's being developed right now. And then finally, the very important event of commencement, our graduation, that ran beautifully last summer outdoors. This year it's going to be Saturday, June 5th, and outdoors on the turf, and it should be fantastic. So if you have, if you want to see an overview of all these changes, if you go to our website, to the landing page, there's a reopening button, and you can just press that, and that will have all these updates there for you to go through. So
Right.
now we can go to the chat.
Now we have questions. All right, we have a lot of questions. And listen, I will tell all of you that I am probably the most excited for prom, because I've been to approximately 25 Derryfield proms in my lifetime, which sounds really creepier than it is, but as a student and a chaperone, and I've never been to one like this, so this will be a really exciting experience for everybody. All right, we do have a lot of questions. I'm going to go back and forth here. If I could ask that you put your questions into the Q&A box, that's just easier for me. I do see some in the chat, and we'll just kind of bounce back and forth. All right, so the first one is there any change in policy related to the mixing of cohorts? I can start to answer that one, Mary. So in the 6th grade, at least, we have started to mix the cohorts on odd days. So they are now, getting to know some new people. And currently, Stephen Pankratz, the STEM teacher, and I have all of them in a weird STEM Latin class. We call it STEMpire, Roman STEMpire. And so they will all have a chance to kind of meet and mingle outdoors when we're doing a lot of surveying outdoors. So it has started in the 6th grade. Even if we mix the cohorts, we still follow all protocols, with distancing and masking and everything like that. But I don't know if there's more you want to add to that, Mary.
Nope, that's great. That's where, and that's really a middle school issue. It's not an upper school. It's never been an upper school issue.
Yeah. And so then the next one is, will spectators be allowed at sporting events?
Outdoors, parent spectators were allowed in the fall, and we'll continue with that, socially distanced and masked.
Yep. And then, will senior celebration be recorded to view after April 8th? I'm sure it will.
I'm going to go right out on a limb and say yes, even though I have no real idea. But everything in Zoom is so easily recorded. I would say
it is.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah.
I'm going with the answer.
Another one, will there be an 8th grade graduation? Yes, we call it send-off, and it looked a little different last year, but yes, there will be a send-off ceremony. Stay tuned for whether that will be fully in person, partially in person. I
believe there's also an 8th grade parade, and I believe that send-off is going to be virtual with a live parade the same day. So more on that exciting event from Mark Blaisdell soon.
Yes. Is the 3-event practice and/or game limit still in place for sports outside of DS?
Oh, that's a travel team question. So we will get back to you on that one.
If a student signed up for choir in the fall, will they be in the choir this spring, or do they need to sign up again?
I do not know the answer to that. That's a good question. But choir is scheduled. Well, it depends how old you are. So we will get that out to you. We'll get some more information. I can see who asked, so we'll get back to you on that.
Choir info. Good. Not a question, but a thank you for continued diligence and communication. Absolutely. You are welcome. Will middle school spring sports now include tennis again? No, they are actually doing a couch to 5K program instead. So if your child is a runner or even a walker or a speed walker, um, they'll be starting that up next week. Will there? Yes. So a send off again. Sorry. Yes, there will be absolutely an 8th grade send off. Will guests such as grandparents be allowed to attend graduation?
Yes. In fact, grandparents were at last year's graduation.
Yeah, it's giant. It's all out on that turf, and we can spread out families and seating, and it's fantastic. Will new masks be made available to the kids?
We have like 1,000 masks. They were just reordered. So buy all the masks you want. Just ask Diane Wall, dwall at derryfield.org, or Andrew Stevenson, A Stevenson at derryfield.org, our middle school and upper school receptionists, and they can arrange that. Or your child can just go right to them and it can be charged to their student accounts.
Yes. Just a clarification on the spring outdoor sports spectators. Will students be allowed to watch outdoor games?
Yes,
Yeah.
it may be limited to seniors. We want to be able make sure that our adult Derryfield adult supervisors can manage the crowd to make sure that they're socially distanced. So for sure, seniors, and we will have more information soon on everyone.
Yep. And then how do you think the level of risk of attending school with the new adjustments compares to the risk in the fall or winter?
Well, of course, I mean, the reason we're making the adjustment, the major adjustment is really around the 3 foot versus the 6 foot. And we would not be making it unless there was a viable peer reviewed study the study actually looked at thousands of school children in hundreds of schools and found a negligible difference between 3 and 6 feet. Otherwise, we would not be doing it. And so I would say there's no additional risk to that. That's really the big move, the big difference. The other one about travel, I think we've been in an extremely conservative space on that, and our families have been extremely respectful. And also people's experiences traveling. Most of our people who are traveling a couple states over, getting an Airbnb, not talking to anyone, going to the grocery store and getting takeout, just like they would have done in New Hampshire or at home in northern Massachusetts. So we feel the risk level is very low.
Awesome. Are Wednesdays still off days for upper school sports?
Wednesdays are off days for upper school sports except varsity teams. Varsity teams do practice or play on Wednesdays.
What are the sports days for the middle school, and when do they start? At what time will they be dismissed? That's a great question.
So,
she's throwing it back to you, Mary. So I believe, although Lord knows I could be lying to you right now, I think it's Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. I'm probably lying.
Monday, Thursday, Friday.
Say what?
Oh, Annie,
Monday.
that's secretly Annie in communications behind that Derryfield school sign. She knows everything. Annie, what does it say in nuts and bolts?
Monday, Thursday, and Friday.
There we go. Thank you, Annie. Monday, Thursday, and Friday. And they are dismissed at, I believe, 4:15 to 4:30. So they're out in time to catch that late bus if they need to. 4:15, I'm going to say. Let's see. We just stated yes to grandparents coming to graduation, yet this person has heard that the guest limit will be 5, including the senior. Has that changed to allow for a larger number of guests?
It's really a mathematical puzzle. And so what we're going to be doing is asking the senior families, how many people would they like to have? Would they really like to have come? And then we'll see, we'll do the mathematics based on the size of the turf field and keeping the family units 6 feet apart. How many people can we fit? So we're going to try to maximize it and still, of course, keep each family 6 feet apart.
Here's a great question. This is a really good question. If a middle schooler is in an upper school class, do they still attend remotely from the middle school, or can they join the class in person?
What a good question. I don't know the answer. I'm going to write that.
So I'm going to say that for now, they still have to join remotely from the middle school, because we've done a lot of work to keep middle school and upper school, kind of contained within those individual buildings, those individual schools. So for now, we're going to have them, Zoom in remotely. If that changes, we will obviously let you know about that.
That would definitely be a question we would take to Fusion Cell
Yeah.
before we made a decision.
Mhm. And I think that's it. I hope I didn't miss anyone.
Maybe, did we check the chat too?
Yeah, I have both of them.
Got them all? And just remember, Nuts and Bolts is such a great source for all these kinds of questions. And also you can go straight to, what is the address, the email where you can ask your COVID questions, Jill?
I believe it's covid@derryfield.org. And there's also a COVID hotline number, which I don't know off the top of my head. Maybe I should, but I don't. But you can also dial into that number, and Lainey and I both get all of those messages, and one of us will get back to you.
I believe that the mysterious Annie Branch behind the Derryfield sign was also going to put into the chat the address for the land, going to the Derryfield website and finding the reopening page. And I'm sure the COVID number is on that page as well.
Yes. Yeah. And
also don't be hesitant. That really is a service. And we're so fortunate to have Lainey Shaughnessy, who comes off of 3 years working as an ER nurse in Seattle, seeing all kinds of COVID related, situations. So if you have questions that aren't exactly Derryfield related, maybe it's your business, maybe it's your family and your extended family or friends, and you have questions, feel free to call. It doesn't have to be just about your child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's it for questions, unless anybody wants to quickly type in another one. All right.
Excellent. And we may be back, right, Jill? Who knows? We'll see. What we need is the cases in New Hampshire to go down. They have veered up, and we're very aware of that. And so we need everybody together to stay strong and not lose our patience. And I know it's really hard to keep saying no so often to your children and the things that they would love to do on the weekends. But so we thank you, don't we, Jill, for partnering with us. Our families have been fantastic.
Absolutely. We really appreciate I speak for all of the teachers when I say that as well, and the faculty and all the faculty and staff.
Deeply appreciate it. So thank you so much. Be well. Have a great night, and see you at school this spring, or see your fabulous children performing. There's so much to look forward to.
I'm so excited. Thank you.
Good night.